back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to talk to you about one of the Booktubesff nominees for this year, and that is one of the fantasy standalone books, and it is called The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I read The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon a while ago, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. I had some issues with it. And I was very intrigued about this when it first came out. I must admit, I think I saw it around everywhere. The marketing was really heavily done with this book, and I did see it in every Waterstones I went in and all over Goodreads and everywhere. However, even though I saw it a lot, I actually didn't hear a lot about it from my reviewer friends for quite a while, and it's only recently that I've started seeing some reviews of it pop up. So I was very intrigued, and I knew it had dragons, and I knew it was a very heavily political story. I wasn't sure if I was going to pick it up, but because it's a nominee and because I'm a judge, I decided I would go ahead, and I'm glad that I did. I actually audiobooked this, and I have to say I think that was a great way to go about it, because I personally know that this is a massive book. It's like 800 or so pages, and holding it up for 800 or so pages worth of reading time would be a lot. So audiobooking really worked for me. It also meant I just got through it generally quicker because I had more time to audiobook than I would have had to sit and read a physical book. So I recommend the audio for sure. The story itself is very political. It's based around a queendom which is called Innis, and this is kind of the main focus of most of the story. However, we do see the world is very divided at the point where we pick up the storyline. We know Innis, and we know the queen who rules there, who is called Queen Sabran, but we don't know too much about the other parts of the world. We know there is a place where one of our other main characters comes from, and we know that's quite far away and has a very different religion and is kind of heretical in Innis. We also know that in the east there are worms/dragons, and over in the east they are very much revered. However, in Innis they are very much frowned upon, and they don't really like dragons and things over there. The world is very divided, and it's been that way for a long time. We also know that magic is definitely something that's in the world, but it's heavily frowned on in Innis, and only certain kind of cultures have it, or use it, or really recognise it. So there's a lot of distrust between nations, there's a lot of kind of history there, and a lot of the book deals with the politics of these different nations and how they can kind of, whether or not they can overcome their struggles to actually join together. Now, the main arc of this narrative is all about a being called the Nameless One who is likely to return. And we know that Queen Sabran of Innis is supposedly filled with blood that can stop the Nameless One from rising. Now, this is a long passed down myth and tradition, and the people who live in Innis believe in her to stop the Nameless One rising. However, something happens to Sabran which causes her to be very fearful about the idea of stopping the Nameless One, and makes her kind of think, actually, maybe this is not quite the truth. She knows that historically speaking, her kind of queendom has always been ruled over by a queen, and that queen has always had an heir in the form of a daughter, but she has not yet got an heir. The next character that we're following is Iad Duran, who is quite an interesting character in herself. She has a lot of secrets, and she has a lot of things that she keeps back from the people in this narrative. So I found it very interesting to read her story. I think you learn a lot about her as the book goes on, and her past and her history and her motivations. And I really feel like she's a character who I liked the most, but it took me a while to really like her, because at first I think she was just so mysterious. I really didn't quite gel with her. I didn't quite get who she was and what she was trying to do. But as the book goes on and you learn more about her, I think you really understand why she is the way she is, and it gets more interesting from that point onward. We also have a character who is called Tane, and Tane is from the other side of the world. She is training to be a dragon rider, but one day something happens which forces her to make a really terrible choice, and this choice kind of leads her on the path to her greater destiny, which is very much wrapped up in what is going to happen to the fate of this world, and she is very heavily involved in that. And in kind of deciding how things are going to go for everyone in this world. Overall, I think it's a very slow starter to read this. It definitely feels like it takes a long time to really get going. The first third, I think, is very slow, and I would say it's the second and third thirds that are kind of quicker. I wouldn't have said I got into it until the second third, if that makes sense, because I think the first one is all just set up and you're still so confused about who is who, because there are a lot of characters being introduced in the first kind of section. But as it goes on, you really understand who's who and who's on what side, and that really helps to kind of clarify it all in your head. And then you start to really emphasize for the characters and their motivations and why they do things kind of become a lot clearer, which makes the whole story easier to follow. So if you get a bit stuck early on, but you like epic fantasy, I'd say keep with it, because I do think it really becomes clear later on. I do think that the story itself is really interesting because it is a standalone. It's a very big book, but it works as a standalone because it does wrap up nicely. I think that the first half is a bit slow, and in contrast, I think that the final third, or the final ending bit, I suppose, is quite fast. I think that has less development than I maybe wanted, but it does tie up in a way that the author potentially could return to this world, but also they don't have to return to this world. So I liked that kind of open-endedness, but also tying it in a bow so it doesn't feel like it needs another book. It just has the option in the future potentially. I also wanted to mention that there are some LGBTQ plus relationships in this book, and I thought they were done very nicely. They fitted perfectly into the story. It did not feel shoehorned at all. Personally, I don't like romances very much in fantasy. I find they can be quite a detractor, but this one worked fine, and it was just a part of the story that made sense, so I liked it, and I thought it was handled very nicely by Samantha Shannon. In the end, I enjoyed it, although I think it could have been potentially condensed in the start and maybe lengthened in the end. I did enjoy it, and I ended up giving it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I think I'd definitely recommend this to fans of epic fantasy who maybe don't want to commit to a giant 10-15 book series like The Wheel of Time, for instance. I think if you want an epic fantasy that doesn't have that time commitment, then this is a really good one to try out. And it's, yeah, fun, political, heavily magical, because there's a lot of magic that comes into it later on. And I'd love to hear your thoughts if you guys have read it, or if you're reading it for Booktubesff, then let me know your thoughts when you do get to it. And I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.